And when there was a rally, you would have 1 million people in the street. Do you realize the feeling of 1 million people rallying, dancing and chanting in a town that is only 3 million people? Of those other 2 million, most of them are babies or ancient people. So it is of the adults, most of the adults are chanting and dancing and jumping out of joy. This joy was coming from an ancient culture, the indigenous culture of Chile, that had this idea that people, through a collective ritual, can become one body, one heart, one fun, universal, total, complete fun. And because this was so, this is what happened. This could not be allowed because a participatory democracy could not exist in the world. If a participatory democracy that was peaceful and non-violent and was completely open-ended and completely chaotic, completely creative, this could mean the end of the system as we know it. So Kissinger and Nixon decided to do this. You probably know this image. This is the image of the government palace of Chile, La Moneda, being bombarded. It was not just a palace that was being bombarded. It was the life and soul, the spirit of a people. It had taken 150 years of building up that democracy to arrive at that notion of participatory democracy that was really an expression of the ancient culture of Chile. Nobody named it that way, but that's the way it felt. That's the way it was. So when that happened, I was in London, I was studying, I was an art student, so-called at the Slade School of Fine Arts. This is funny, didn't want to come out. And my schooling up there didn't mean that I studied anything. I had chosen to be a so-called non-diploma student. That meant that I had a studio and I was all by myself in the solitude of London without nobody checking my work, except once every 6 months. It was an extremely lonely thing to be in London feeling that this was happening in Chile. I never undid my suitcase because I felt that the culture of London had already taken place, while the culture of Chile, of the Americas, was just beginning to rise up, beginning to be something. And I was in that space when the military coup happened. And so at the moment I had been invited to do an artist book for Borges Press, a Fluxus press in England, run by a Mexican and an Englishman together, Felipe Ehrenberg and Tony Major. And so they had invited me to do an artist book, but when the military coup occurred, I had like 2 weeks for my book to go to press, and the beautiful book that I had planned dissolved in my hands, dissolved in my spirit, and I created the Saura Me that has now been reprinted in more or less the course of 2 or 3 weeks. I knew that everything that I had experienced in Chile, including my art and my poetry and everything that I had written, would be erased. And so it was, and the poems that I had written in Chile, to this moment, they are still unpublished, still censored after 17 years of dictatorship and then 20 years of fake democracy, of a democracy allowed by the system, a democracy that is not participatory. So I made the book to be a testimony of that moment. I included letters that friends had sent me from Chile. And then the meaning of this book began to change as I was even thinking of it, as I was even imagining it, because simultaneously in Chile, look at the joy of the face of the soldiers when they were going into people's houses and digging out every possible book and magazine that you had. And so they were digging out the notebooks with the addresses of your friends, so not only you would disappear, but everybody in your phone book, in your little address book, and every book that you had. So this little frail book that I was doing was coming in the midst of this huge fogata, this huge bonfire of books. Every day I had decided to do an object from the debris of London. I myself felt as a debris. I was una basurita. I was a completely worthless kind of creature because so many people were dying, and there I was roaming the streets of London like a ghost. And so I began constructing a form of poetry that was not even written. It was not even a journal. It was a diary of basuras, a diary of debris. And I gathered like 100, and then 200, 300, 400 objects. That means a year and a half. I began before the military coup. In the beginning, it was to prevent the coup, and then it became a prayer for people to gather strength and build the resistance movement. You can't really see, but this is a rotten piece of red silk I found in the garbage. So I had a little typewriter, the one that you saw in the movie, which I still have, and I would write there, and it says, I can't even see myself, a diary of objects for the Chilean resistance. And these are some of the debris pieces. As you see, it was perfectly possible to find in London a combination between the debris of the city and the debris that I found in my own studio, the stamps from the letters I received from Chile. These, just to give you a sense of a scale, these are the sticks from burnt incense. So that little creature is about this size. And these are the bunches that have become totems. And so, in the middle of that incredible despair, there was something really beautiful going on, which is that artists all over the world had mobilized to support the Allende government.